information from? Where do we find out? Where do we learn? If we read books, if we have a look at videos, if we go down to the parks or the spaces, then quite often we can see things, but we don't always have the full and robust understanding about how to or what to do. Sometimes we really just don't have the time. We're not really quite sure when to go or what to do when we get there, and how long should we participate in something when we're there. And then for our last one, what we're thinking about, you know, the spaces and places, where should we go to in the outdoors in order to be able to enjoy ourselves? Where are we allowed to go? And some of the questions I get asked quite often, are we allowed to go into this particular space? So if you live in Scotland, the reality is that there's the freedom to roam, and so you can go into a lot more spaces than is possible to if you live in England, for example. So when we're thinking about the barriers to participation, what we're looking at today in reality is how can we alleviate some of those barriers in order to get more children outdoors. So imagine not the barriers, the fear, imagine the change it would actually have in terms of our relationships, in terms of our children, in terms of the developing freedom of movement, freedom of thinking, freedom of imagination, freedom to create. That adventure, that excitement, that exhilaration that we have when we're actually being pushed to our limits. And also, there are theorists, and they tell us that actually well-being comes from our sense of health, it comes from movement, it comes from a sense of feeling like a fish in water, and it also comes with a sense of challenge there with our adventures. And if we're going out with our children or taking our children into that outdoor space, what we're doing is actually creating memories. And I wouldn't be surprised if you guys could now, just for a second, think about your best memories from when you were a child. It was probably when you were in an outdoor environment with people that you loved, people that you cherished, and with people who were caring and looking after you, and you were able to share experiences with them. So memories are very, very important as we're growing up, and they start to establish and foundation for all future experiences that we have. So what we're having a look at here is the 4 W's of go. How can we go outside? What is it that we need to have in place in order to be able to get outdoors? And here's just a few pictures that I thought were really lovely of different ways. Children happy, smiling, families, exhilaration, moving around. This was actually, the big picture was from the launch of the Middlewood Nature Nursery, when we had all the families all getting together. And you can see the relationships between older and younger generations as we're starting to share experiences, and the look of happiness and wonder on that little boy's face, and just the quiet contemplation with the little girl who sat there with her feet in the waterfall and feeling the sensations of the water as it's starting to crash down. And so getting children outdoors is fundamental, just in terms of our well-being and in terms of our processes that build us into what we call a capable learner, and are developing what we call sustainable, personal sustainability. So our first W is why. Why do we want to go out? Why do we want to be in an outdoor space at all? Because our children quite often are very happy, are they not, inside? And like we said, we have fear, we don't have the time, we're not sure about the spaces to go, and we don't really know what it is we're supposed to be doing. So why is it that we would want to go outdoors? And the first reason really is because it's natural. We're biological beings. Our children are biological beings. We're part of nature. It's natural inquiry, natural investigation, natural exploration. That in order for children to grow and to develop, is that they need to be in an outdoor environment, because it's where they function to the best of their abilities. The outdoors also nurtures. When we're indoors and we're in man-made environments, what happens is that every single sound that we hear that's unnatural allows us to, it causes our brains to fire and release what we call the fight or flight stimulants in the body. But when we're in an outdoor space, what happens is that the brain can hear and feel the sensations through all of our senses, and what it does is actually creates and reduces the cortisol that's released in the brain, and it allows our children then to be able to grow and develop in an unstressful way. And being in an outdoor space also allows our children for a neurological development. So it's all about our brains and the way that the brain waves work. It's the way that the connections work. And it allows our children's brains to have a deeper understanding about the world around them and where they live and the people who are actually in that world as well. I thought this was a very interesting word. I was trying to think about a word that would allow us to think about the word like unstructured, and nebulous is one of those ones, isn't it, that if we encounter something which is nebulous, it appears to be perhaps unfathomable or unpredictable. And I think sometimes that we as grown-ups, we want to make sure that our children's lives are organised, everything is put in the right place. If we're going to take them outside, then it needs to be a set rules. We're going to go at this particular time, we're going to come back at this time. But actually, all the research shows us about play is the fact that actually a lot of it needs to be very, very unstructured so that children are responsible for their own outcomes. And there's a movement which is called No Child Left Behind, and what we know is that children being in an outdoor space, playing in greenness, what it does is reduces the barriers to them and their development. That it doesn't matter about their socio-economic backgrounds, because when children are in outdoors, it encourages them physical movement, it encourages language, it encourages creativity, it encourages brain development as well. And so what we're saying is that being in an outdoor space and why we want to go out, what it does is provide every single child who's there with an equal footing in their own development. So we've talked a little bit about the why, and what we're going to have a look at now is the where. And when we're looking at the where, what we're thinking about, now this looks a very exciting picture, doesn't it, when we're looking at landscape diversity. Now, one of the reasons that this has actually been developed, and there's a really fabulous guy called Alan Cree who's actually helped me to come up with this, is that we were having a looking at the variations of different spaces and outdoor places and what they would actually offer us in terms of complex environments, into relationships with the creatures and the flora and fauna, the things that grow there. And actually thinking, you can see there on ancient woodland, is that ancient woodlands have been around since before 1600. They've got a variety of species, and what that means is that their complexity is more intense. And if the complexity is more intense, what that means then is there's more things there that can actually invoke our imaginations, invoke our sense of connection and our relationship with the natural environment, and that touches us on many, many different levels. There is also different structures within woodlands and spaces. So if we have a looking, at conifer woodlands or planted woodlands that are perhaps quite young, is that what we have is the main tree species that's there, but actually an understory, the bits that are on the ground, the bits the children are going to play for, are perhaps less complex or complicated. But that can also be an advantage to us because it means there's less things to fall over, for example. And then you can see we've got wild spaces, we go to shelter belts, and quite often if we live in an urban area, a lot of the little green spaces that we end up going down to will actually be shelter belts. And we've got orchards school or nursery playgrounds with trees. We have green space, or I've put before trees because that's not then an orchard, and then gardens and shrubs, and then grass and playground. And what happens as we move down around the scoring is that when we're getting to number 11 and number 12, what that means is that we as grown-ups need to start thinking more creatively about what we're going to actually offer for our children, because their imaginations and their sense of discovery is actually going to be reduced because of the lack of diversity, the lack of loose parts that are going to be there for them. Okay, so we've had a look at why we want to go out, the ends of why, with the wheres and the landscape diversity and what that can actually offer to us. And then thinking then about the whens. When would we want to be there? When would we want to go out into the outdoor spaces? So we were thinking about the 4 S's here, very simple and straightforward, because it's a good question, isn't it? Well, if you have a lack of understanding, you know, when do I go out? What's the best time? And I was trying to think of ways of being able to describe, because it'd be very easy for someone to turn around and say, "We'll just go out anytime." But anytime is great. But what I wanted to do was actually split it up. So I thought these 4 were ways that could do that. So each of the seasons will offer different environments in order to experience. So we can feel the sun on our faces, or the wind, or the rain. We need to put on more clothes. We understand how we would need to dress, perhaps. And if we were thinking, you know, well, we're going to be going out into the water in big puddles, what kind of things will we need to put it on in order to maintain our well-being? So for our children, what we're doing is actually offering them alternatives as well throughout the year to start develop their emotions and their connection to the place in which they're going out, because they can see the changing seasons. And then we're thinking about sensory. So where and when would I go? Well, when will sight, smell, touch, taste and sound, will they be the same early in the morning? Will they be the same at sunrise or midday? Will they be the same at night time? And there is direct correlation between sunshine or daylight and sleeping. You know, on green spaces and our attention to detail, attention to ourselves, attention to other people, attention to learning. So when we think about sensory and we're looking at sight, will things look the same? So if the sun's up and really bright, will things look the same as in the middle of winter? Will the smells be the same? I have a very poignant memory, you know, when spring starts coming and people start cutting their grass, and you can smell the wet grass when it's been cut, and it's a very good childhood memory for me. Touching, you know, when there are leaves on the ground, do they feel the same as when the leaves are on the tree, when the buds are coming out? The taste, even very simple things like berries or apples or pears and fruit and vegetables that we can actually start to pick, you know, when we're in an outdoor space. How do the sounds make us feel? Do the birds sound the same every single time that we go out, or do they change as well when they're connected to the different seasons? And then also thinking, when do we go out? Well, sometimes we just want to go out and be on our own. And I think that that's actually a very, very good opportunity for us, you know, for us and our child, or us and our children, or us, just to be in a space where we can be quiet, we can be contemplative, we can be reflective, we can have time to think and develop our abilities to be able to understand ourselves and regenerate as well, and recuperate too. And then when we have peers around, because when we have other people, when we have our friends around us, then that play is going to be very, very different, isn't it? And if there is an overbearance of adults with a child, then how is that going to constrain or give them different levels of freedom in order to be able to discover and play and get the best out of their particular environment? So again, what type of environment are we going to go to? Are we going to go into urban areas? Are we going to make the effort to get up and, you know, kind of go out into the countryside or to the parks and to see different types of environments? So when we choose to go out, we'll be thinking about the social aspects, so our season, sensory, social, and then of course we're thinking about safety, because we don't want to go out and we're not going to be putting our children at risk. That this links up very closely with fear, you know, our barriers to fear that we were talking about right at the beginning. So as you can just see inside the little box, we've got safety, but we're talking about risk, and we're talking about perceived risk and real risk. So it's the more experience we have, our understanding of risk actually changes, because we understand that, you know, that if we were to go and run out into the middle of a road, that's a real risk. But we also have perceived risk by things because we have a lack of knowledge. We're not sure about something, and so we put a barrier around it and say, well, I'm definitely not going to go and do that because it's too dangerous. Whereas the reality is that with the right precautions, the right equipment, the right clothes, the right protection, is that actually that becomes a perceived risk. And all of that provides us with a sense of challenge. And as we've said before, is that children need a certain sense of challenge in order to feel well about themselves. Okay, so, oh, Joe, quickly. Okay, brilliant. Okay, just need to go to this one to see. Okay, lovely. So we've looked at the whys, we've looked at the whats, we've looked at the whens, and now we're going to look at, we're going to look at that one too, which is great. Okay, I think, here we go, the whats. The 6 I's to go. Here we go then. So what is it that we're actually going to be doing? Okay, now the first one of all of these is about information. Okay, we're going to gather information, because one of the things I think that we get a little bit confused about as grown-ups is that we're not really quite sure what it is that we're supposed to be doing, and so we try to organise everything, and then when we start to organise, what we do is actually detract from the child's innate desires and their innate passions. So the first thing we're going to do is to observe, and we're going to come on to this in a little bit more detail when we finish these following few slides. Okay, so it's about observation. That's where we start from. We're gathering information about what it is that motivates our child to be absolutely wonderful. And we're going to be investigating what we're going to call the chocolate box to go. And as you can see, we've got the acronym here, the CHOCOLATE, and we're going to be using that. And this is linking into a schema. And we're going to be using this as our observational tool. Okay, so we're thinking about information gathering and observation. That's how we're going to do it. So it's about initiation. So what is it that our passion is, what motivates us, and what gets our children engaged in what it is that they're doing and what they're playing with. And then what's about their intuition and their inner motivations. Okay, so their intuition will be things where they see something and they just follow that natural interest because it's actually coming from inside of them. And quite often we try to tell our children, don't we, what it is they should be interested in or they should be excited about. But our children are incredibly creative beings, and every single child is very, very different in terms of what is actually going to have an inner motivation for them. And then we're looking at what we call our intention. So what's our focus? What is it that we intend to lose ourselves in? What is it that our children want to get engrossed in? So we're thinking about intention. So we're thinking about seeing how engaged they are, how their eyes are, how their body language is. We can all see, can't we, when a child is deeply engrossed or engaged in something, because time seems to stand still for them. And if time stands still for them, then we know that they are on the learning process. And what we have here then is inquiry and investigation. So the inquiry investigation, and that's also about challenge. And what we see is children formulating hypotheses It doesn't matter how old they are, from a very, very early age, they are creating, through their intention and their focus, they're developing an understanding, and they're trying to work out if something's going to work for them, or it's going to have an outcome, or what that outcome is actually all going to be about. Okay, so our intention, investigation, inquiry, and that provides a challenge. Now, if something's a little bit too challenging, what will happen is that our children will give up. But this all links into what we call resilience. And resilience is an important attribute or trait, personality trait, that in our fast food, do it all, get it now culture, is that a lot of children give up very, very quickly in aims and their intention, and their motivation sort of swift about. So our what's, we have our 6 eyes, information, which is from our point of view, and we're observing in our children what initiates them, what enables them to become engrossed, where their intuition is, where their inner motivations are, the things that spark them. It's a bit like, you know, the flame of a fire, what their intention is and their focus, and where their inquiry and their investigation is, because that will provide them with the right levels of challenge. And again, we can observe their body language as well as their communication in other ways in order to be able to do that. Okay, well, here we have, I'm just putting this in here now because here's a book that's been written by myself, and it gives us a lot of different ideas about what to use, what activities that we can do with our children. And normally this is for sale on our shop, and it's £9.99, but for you guys, because I want you to go away with something as well at the end of the masterclass, is that you can buy this off the shop, and you can see the little link that's going to be down there for 50% off, so it's only £4.99. Okay, so we will now return to our chocolate box. Okay, I always like acronyms, you know, things that we can easily have in our minds that will allow us to be able to remember things. So these link into schema. Now, many of you will probably be aware of schema, will have heard it before. Some of you may not, and it was developed initially by a theorist called Piaget, but developed by a lady called Chris Athy, and then Cathy Nutt-Brown. And Cathy Nutt-Brown is from the University in Sheffield, and she's written a couple of very interesting books. And it helps us to be able to observe children's methodologies of trying to understand and make sense of the world around them, the physical world around them. And what we will actually see and observe is children taking part in different kinds of behaviours in order to be able to understand the world around them. So our first one is circles. So anything that a child will be doing or participating in that means that they are going round in circles, they're looking at things that move in circles or go round or rotate, so wheels on cars or bikes. My little boy used to sit in front of the washing machine and watch that going round and round and round. Spinning. Places like Alton Towers are very specifically developed and designed on the processes of spinning and understanding how our bodies feel as we roll down hills and we spin. I love this photograph because it just looks like those girls are having so much fun in going round and round and round in circles. And I wonder if you guys can actually remember when you were a child, you know, did anybody spin you around and around? And you know, when you used to just go round and round so much that you used to fall over and giggle all the way down. So circles is a really good understanding and a way that we can do that. And if people do have questions later, you know, about any of these different sort of activities or things that we might observe, then please feel free to ask, because Paul will be coming back at that point to answer any questions. So we have height here. So we're looking at things that are going up and down, be that in straight lines or just be that just on a vertical trajectory. So I love that picture of ladders that just there on that shed, you know, going up and down, up and down, up and down, climbing up and down, but also building up and down. And we had a lovely little video from the nursery the other day, and there's a little boy, and he was only about 2 or 3 years old. No, he wasn't actually. He was probably about 18 months to 2, and he was trying to balance sticks upright, a little bit like this, and they kept falling over. But he was actually experimenting with this, with height and how things can stay up and how things can, you know, be balanced around. And the more that children have that experience of trying to balance things and put things up, getting themselves up, throwing things, the more that they're able to fine-tune their hand-eye coordination, their body language, their physical strengths, their core, you know, their body cores, you know, muscles in their arms as well, and looking at things and gravity and learning all about gravity. And I guess that's where Newton started off with the apple falling on his head, didn't he, with things falling from a great height. And we have a number of forest school practitioners, a couple that really stick out in my mind, who you know, are very much into, you know, balancing rocks. And I'm sure that some of you guys have tried it in the past. You know, you go down to the beach or go down to the river and start building things up, and it's a challenge, isn't it? You know, how high can we build something, or build a structure, or how high can we get, or how high can we throw things? And it's a really good way of learning about the physicality of the world. I love this picture as well, because our children need to climb over and under things. And Frobel, who some of you will know and will have heard about, is an early educationist, and he said, you know, to climb a tree is for a child to discover a new world. And isn't it just like that? And actually I challenge each of you this week to go out and go and find a tree and go and climb it and go and sit in it, and go and remember what it was like to have that freedom in order to be able to climb, and see what it's like to go under and round and use our bodies in such different ways. And what I love about this particular photograph is that each child is on their own, but some of them are actually observing. You can see the little girl with the stripy trousers on. She's actually looking at the other girl to find out how high she's going, how she's climbing. And what happens then is we can start to learn different ways of being and moving our bodies, our balance, and our left and right. And most of you will understand that through crawling around and using our opposite hands and feet and knees develops what we call cross-lateralization, so the way that the brain, the neurons in the brain spark up together, and that actually develops language, and it develops our understanding for reading and writing as well. And a lot of children you'll see or find out and discover who are perhaps dyslexic are children who didn't necessarily crawl or have an opportunity to use their bodies left and right in the way that these guys are having an opportunity to do, and also squeezing up, down into and underneath things as well, and then covering up. So it might be covering up themselves, covering up others, covering up something that's precious, and some of you may know this as enveloping, or as if we were putting ourselves or something else tightly into an envelope, and to keep it safe or to keep it clean. And quite often we have a misunderstanding, don't we? As you know, you have a child, I'm sure that some of you will have seen children, and what happens is that they do a beautiful picture, and it might be of their family or some friends, and then they get a big black crayon and then they cover it all up, and our natural tendency is to say, oh, don't spoil that, but actually what they're doing is enveloping or covering it to keep it safe, and keep it forever. So when we start to understand these different schemas and way that children naturally want to explore, what that means is that our bodies can change and our languages can change as well. So the next one we have in our chocolate box is about owning and filling. So filling things up, it could be our pockets, it could be buckets, and I think these are very gorgeous pictures here. These are all children from the nursery. You know, some of them are very little. This little toddler on the left-hand side, you can see hand-eye coordination, using spades to fill, you know, used mud to put into the flower pots. They've got a little watering can there that they're starting to, and having an understanding about the different concepts of weights and measures and how much and how little will fit into certain spaces. And then this little girl here, she's you can see she's actually filling her little pot up with leaves just by her knees, and she's learning to balance while she's going through that process as well. So filling, we quite often give our children bags as well, so they can just go and wander around and put things in them. If we're observing, we know that children are fillers, and it's about owning and holding on to something. And I don't know if I've got children, you know, when children are interested in this owning and filling stage of their schema, as you get home from nursery and their pockets are just full of cars or dinosaurs that they've decided to fill their own pockets with and taken away as well at the end of the day. And here we have level lines, so things that, you know, children will line up cars or line up sticks, line up themselves, walk along things, have things in straight lines. And again, here you can see our children here. So there's the little girl here, she's climbing along the levelness of the line of the tree here, but she's also investigating. Can you see the bark? So she's touching that and following some of those lines with her fingers. So this is a child who's very interested in that formation of straight lines and levelness. And the other children there are all sitting in their line. I think they're on a train going on a massive adventure there somewhere. And then we have attachment or connection, so attaching things to each other. And here you can see this little boy is greatly engrossed. He's 4. He's learning to tie sticks together. He's learning his knots, and you can see his focus. Can you remember we talked about that intention, that inner motivation, and the ways that we're going to be working with that. And these two, they're actually, not only are they attached the string to the stick very proudly, but they're actually attached each other to the stick and to themselves as well. So attachment comes in very different ways, and starting to understand how we go through those different processes and how things link together. And then we have going through things, through barriers, through as you can see here, this little girl, she's trying desperately to get through that fence, but what she's not quite understanding is that if she could climb up a little bit and go through, then she would actually be able to participate in that. So she's going through a process of elimination as well. And we talked about hypotheses, didn't we, and how our hypotheses about process will enable us to be able to start understanding. And if we have a boundary, we all like crossing boundaries, don't we? I mean, let's be honest, if there's a boundary there, we want to cross it, don't we? But we can have arbitrary boundaries. So when we go, we can have barriers like this where we can't get through, but then also we can learn, you can see that's the pathway, which is the edge of the forest, and that's another boundary. And then on the other side, there's the grass, and then there's another boundary on there. And so children like to push boundaries, and they need to be able to understand those and to appreciate those, and we need to give children an opportunity to be able to participate in that. And then the last one, which is edging, or going around something, encircling, or enclosing something. And this little boy here, you can see he's actually made this beautiful natural piece of art. He's been off and collected stuff. He's kind of filling it, but he's now watering them, you can see, with his little bottle as well. So that's his little bottle of juice, and he's starting to actually to water those flowers as well. But there's the boundary all the way around the outside, or the edge, to something to contain it, and again to keep it safe. A little bit like enveloping, but it means that it's in a bigger space. And so that's our really our chocolate box to go. This is our observational tool. and we have all of those processes there. And so why are we wanting to get children outside? Well, we want happiness and we want healthy, because that means that our children are going to be well, and they're going to grow into what we call our capable learner. And if you remember right at the beginning, we talked about a capable learner in the individual. And we've got here the Archimedes Forest Schools model, because that's something where this process, the depth of all of this is actually coming from. About the intention, our intention is that if we have a capable learner, if we have somebody who is provided with the opportunities, then that has a positive benefit to family, education, community, society, and then a massive benefit into the world as a whole as well. So there we go. So over to you, Paul, now. So if anybody has any questions, then that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I love the way that you explored both the deep sort of theoretical underpinnings, but then so nicely connected it with real practical, on-the-ground experiences as well. So yes, we've got a few questions which we'll go through. Just to address a couple of points. If anyone wants to have the presentation, if they contact info@forestschools.com, you'll be able to get a copy of them there. And the code for redeeming the book at the special offer price, the code is Masterclass. So Barbara asks, what have been the favourite experiences for the groups in forest schools, and were you surprised by what became their favourite experiences? But then she also asks, do you think that a lack of outdoor play is contributing to anxiety levels amongst children?
Oh, sorry, are you asking me? I thought you were going to answer the questions, Paul.
Sorry, yeah, Barbara was asking, do you think that outdoor play is contributing to anxiety levels at all?
I absolutely believe 100% that the lack of outdoor play is contributing massively for a number of the reasons that we've spoke about already. You know, because children need to run about, they need to let off steam, they need to explore. And what happens is that if we're not using our whole bodies, all of our senses, and developing a sense of place and a sense of space within the outdoor environment, what happens is that we get confined in our man-made environment, and then that increases cortisol levels in the brain, and that increases anxiety, and it puts a false sense of what reality or what expectations is because it's actually looking at children trying to pretend that they know what the right answer is. And what we're saying here is actually children are inventive and creative individuals, and the outdoor play enables them to actually come up with their own problem-solving solutions.
Lovely. And then one more. Kate asks, how do you use your chocolate box observation tool into the planning process? Do you look at it from a group level, or do you do more individual planning?
We would always use that on a more of an individual plan, because we know that each child is unique, and therefore each child will be participating at a different. It's like, you know, having a different chocolate at any particular moment in time, and it might be that you have children within the setting that are actually participating and deeply engrossed in different aspects of the box all at the same time. So it's important that we observe each child, because then we know what kind of language to use with them, because if they're into lines and levels the same, you know, then we'll be providing them with opportunities for them to extend their experience in that. Is that okay?
Fantastic. And Janine was asking, and I've just had a look at a couple of references I can give you here about research for why children get outdoors. So Janine, there's a whole range of research behind this. And it goes into various fields, from the play-based to looking at schema, like Sarah was introducing us to this evening. But just to give you a kind of broad scope to be able to look and sort of compare and contrast, I'll put these up on the chat, but you can have a look at work by people like Nina Morris, who looked at health and well-being in open spaces, UK-based. Another good UK-based one, which looks more broadly at wilder spaces, is done by Open Space Research Centre. But then you can have a look at individual trips as well. So there's a wonderful bit of research called Changing Minds, the lasting impact of school trips. Peacock, I think it was, that ran this research. And probably one of the most interesting ones, one that's actually not referenced much, is done by the Field Studies Council, someone called Mark Rickinson in 2004. And what that does is it looks at a whole range of different things, from activities to building community projects through to fieldwork. So it looks at a nice broad range of different types of research. And all of these research pieces, they draw out why we want to do this, what's the value that we get from exploring these kind of experiences. So I think there's just time for one more question. What would you say to parents who feel that this will hold them back when going to school versus, due to a changing environment? That's from Emily. So I think the key thing here is to look at what is being invested in terms of the learner, the child, the human being, that they can then take with them into those different environments. Yes, the outdoors is fundamentally different to being in the indoor space, but also the culture that we build around it can be quite different. And we can create a space whereby, if we can invest in their traits, their characteristics, their positive emotional memories, that perhaps we can only do in certain ways through outdoor learning experiences, then they can carry those with them right throughout any kind of experience they have, especially then going into perhaps more challenging environments where they're time and task orientated. So if we invest in the learner can invest in the learning. So I think just want to say thank you again to Sarah for spending all this time this evening, sharing all of her insights and experiences. If you'd like to follow up with anything that you've heard as part of this webinar this evening, if you can email us at info@forestschools.com, and we're excited to explore and take that journey on with you.
Can I just say one thing as well, Paul, is that there's a number of people that have asked some really interesting questions that we actually haven't got time to answer here, but what they can do then is perhaps post them to me, okay, at sarah@forestschools.com.
Fantastic. Right,
Lovely.
Okay? Thank you very much, and have a fantastic evening.
Okay, bye-bye. Listen, everybody, it's been absolutely fabulous to have you here. I'm really excited, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. And I do